Wheel of Genre, the show for readers who enjoy a worshipful beast. Right now, we are reading every story in Ann and Jeff VanderMeer's The Weird Anthology, including this one, George R.R. Martin's Sandkings. I'm Zach, and this week I am really interested in the plotting, the really tight and concise plotting on this that had me like furiously scribbling notes on like things to rip off in my own story writing. I don't know if you do that.
Oh, yes, 100%. Yeah. It's the way to live, Zach.
Yep. Steal like an artist, I guess.
Steal like an artist. I'm Bob. I just rubbed something into my eye. I'm really interested in eerie hobbies. I feel like people don't talk about eerie hobbies much anymore. And I had a friend one time who came over and he's like, oh, I got to go back home and feed my rare Bolivian fish. And I was like, what? Blew thousands of dollars on all these crazy fish in an aquarium. But anyway, I'm interested in eerie hobbies. Zach, this story was so fun. Immediately pure fun. I absolutely loved Sandkings. Have you read much Martin before?
Well, like everyone else, I read the entire Game of Thrones series, but it was over 10 years ago. Fun fact, a little trivia for you. I did not wear glasses until I lay in bed with an iPad pressed up against my face in the dark and read the entire Game of Thrones series over the course of like 2 years. What do you know? Vision's gone after that.
So Song of Ice and Fire is taking your vision away. He should send you a free pair of glasses like Michael B. Jordan with the retainer. Song of Ice and Fire is so great. It's been 10 years for me too, but I think that was an absolute blast. Of course, I started with the show. So I watched the show first and I wasn't going to believe in it. Someone convinced me to watch it. And I thought, wow, I immediately have to continue watching this, read the books. They're very fun. And I think Sandkings has the same kind of fun. It's strange because it starts off kind of like Game of Thrones. However, it is a classic pet story.
Before we get into exactly what happens, I do have a big trivia dump for you because this one's interesting. It won the Triple Crown. It won the Hugo, the Nebula, and the Locus. It was published in Omni in 1979. And I don't know why, but like, maybe I'm old, maybe I'm late, but the thought of George R. R. Martin publishing this in 1979 and having his moment like 30 years later, getting his flowers from HBO like 30 years later, it's just kind of crazy to me. But he wrote, this was the third of 3 stories that he wrote over a Christmas break in 1978, 1979. He thought it was the least impressive of the 3 that he wrote, the other 2 being The Way of the Cross and The Way of the Cross and Dragon and The Ice Dragon, but this ended up being the most well-received. It's insane to me that he thought this was the stinker, but what do I know? But he initially thought that maybe he could turn this into kind of like an anthology series with the 2 shop owners, maybe like having different franchises and different planets in his Thousand Worlds kind of universe, but I guess it never really panned out.
What a great opportunity for fan fiction, though. This is like the ultimate. It's very scary. It's very violent. It's very horrific. But it would be great, I think, as like a weird, cozy, weird anthology. I think people could have a lot of fun with these pets. This is great. It's pets. So he's going to buy, there's the main character's name is Simon Kress, and he has lots of strange, rare animals. He lives in kind of a futuristic, it's not even, he goes over the Rainbow Bridge to go to like Baldur's area, and he goes to buy pets. So I'm not exactly sure what this weird future is. They have flying cars. There's access to all sorts of alien life, and there are pets available for sale. He is tired for what he normally gets, and he wants something new. And these pets, as soon as we saw what these pets were, I think that was my favorite moment of the story. It's so weird. It's so fascinating. It's so interesting. So he goes into the pet shop, and the pet store, well, the other pet stores, they don't have what he wants. They don't have something interesting, but he calls Shade and Woe, or Woe and Shade. And it's the first time they've opened, and he goes in, it's just full of mist. That's obviously, a weird red flag when you go into a pet store, and it's just so full of mist. You can't really see that far in front of you. Fog is leaked in. And Wool comes up and she says, okay, I've got this, I've got that. He says, no, I've already seen something like these. I've already had birds that can mimic anything that I say, can mimic any sound. That's not that interesting. She says, well, have you ever had a pet that worships you? And he's like, yeah, of course I have pets that love me. But she said, no, have you ever had a pet that treats you like a god, that really worships you? And he says, okay, now you've got me intrigued. Takes him to a terrarium. And in this terrarium, if you've ever been to a really, really big pet store, there will be, large terrariums, different kinds of creatures, but this one's huge. And it has these 4 like teeny tiny little castles. I guess they're like the size of a water bottle. And there's these 4 castles, and each one has these little tiny bugs wandering around them. As they look closer, they look in closer, they realize that they're almost like medieval little warriors. It's almost the mini version of the Song of Ice and Fire. Each place in this little tiny terrarium. And what happens is these little bug-like creatures that live in there, they will worship whoever owns them. And they will build your face on the side of the castle. And they use whatever material they can get their hands on. They sculpt your face. And the best part is, according to Simon Kress, is they will go to war. So he buys these pets because they will daily go to war with each other.
From here, he takes them home. The story, it's a long story, but really, I think the fundamental logic of it is a kind of one thing leads to another. Maybe even like a Sorcerer's Apprentice type story.
Yeah.
He starts. Well, he's not a what we would call a good person. He torments them. He starves them to make them more aggressive. He quickly learns that by being a vengeful and angry god, he gets a little bit more fun out of what he's seeing inside of the tank. But he starts basically cockfighting with them, like dropping in various aggressive creatures in and seeing who comes out on top, having, kind of a gambling ring associated with it. But eventually these deadly animals aren't enough. And, one thing leads to another. He starts feeding it people, but then, and then from there, like things really spiral out of control. The pet shop owner comes in. She doesn't like what she sees. The cage gets broken. And now he has a problem on his hands, or rather, I should say, in his house, tunneling through the doorways, and just everywhere. Like I said before, like the Sorcerer's Apprentice, it is a tale of constantly escalating stakes, and I think that is what I found so enjoyable and masterful about it. Every single scene, it was like, oh, that's bad. Well, let me show you something a little bit worse. It has its own internal rhythm.
Oh, it's like showing scars. He is the most psychotic, I think. It just reminds me of Jaws. You think that's a bad shark bite. Let me show you this shark bite. He is there's quite a few psychotic characters, I guess, in the weird. And this guy is psychotic through and through, and he's just evil. But it makes me think of weird stories with faces. I think it's really important, the face of evil, your own face, seeing your face appear in something evil. We've seen it in Genius Loci. We've seen it in other stories where there's just something out there looking at you. And I really like these pets. While it is, you could look at it and say, oh, that's cute. I mean, it's like little toy soldiers almost. However, there's something disturbing about this living castle. They call it the maw. And you just throw in whatever, and this maw will eat it. The little soldiers bring it back. They put it in their castle, and their castle eats it. And it's this biological creature. It just grows. It's living. It's organic. And there's something disturbing, I think, about seeing your own face look back out at you from this organic creature as it grows. And it's really interesting because each one of these little armies is a different color. So there's the black army, the red army, the yellow army, and the orange army. I think I have that right. The white army, not the yellow army. Sorry. So each one constructs the face in a different way. So at one, I think the white army is his favorite, and they make this really, they use different colors. They use like shale or something to make the gray in his hair. And then the orange one, they never quite grow fast enough. There's something wrong with their army. And the face looks a little bit demented. So it's his own face staring back at him, but it looks kind of clownish. The other ones look kind of in between benevolent and in between evil. And as he abuses these poor creatures, they start to change they resculpt the faces so they reflect the abuse. They become evil. They smirk. They look satanic. I think it's so interesting how the face is such a part of the weird.
Yeah, and I think that like the specific weirdness of it is seeing a face that is your own face reflected back at you, but it not being the aspects of you that you identify with. I think that this character is obviously wicked person, but I don't think he's very self-reflective about who he is or maybe what he is, you know. He's kind of gleefully evil, I think we could say. So I think that there's like we recognize the surprise in him in seeing these faces that are slowly morphing into becoming more and more twisted. But what it's really doing is it's reflecting the truth back at him. I think that like you can't look at this without thinking of the portrait of Dorian Gray. You know what I mean? Like it's something that is beyond yourself, but giving you kind of the truth of yourself hidden away. And transforming as the story goes and as the character changes himself.
You know, I think the faces are really, this is obvious to anyone ever, I suppose, but I think the face is a good indicator to how your life is going at the moment. We had to do yearbook pictures today, and so each teacher had to go up and take their picture, and then I saw mine, and I just look like a psychopath, like so tired. My hair is like down, the wind was blowing all over my face. I haven't slept well in like a week, and so my picture forever in the yearbook is just like this. But it's just terrible. But I think it's really interesting when Woe, who is there's two people, you know, Woe and Shade. And we finally understand who Shade is at the very end, but we never meet Shade. And Woe keeps saying, no, Shade doesn't do social things. But Woe says, look, Cress, there are some instructions. You have to keep these things safe. And she realizes, I think, how important faces are in the weird. She says, look to your faces, Simon Cress. Look to your faces. She gives him the warning that if things do start to change, that temperature check of seeing what the faces look like, it's going to show how much he is messed up with these pets. And I think that is why the end is so effective. Well, I guess we could see if we think the end is so effective, but here we should get into major spoilers. But, you know, come on, read the story. It doesn't matter anyway. Sorry, cut that me if you're complaining.
No. You're already watching. I'm talking to you. You're already watching the video. Just, if you haven't read the story and you've clicked on this, I don't know how long it's going to be. I'm guessing 30 minutes. If you're clicking a 30-minute video on a story that you haven't read, just reevaluate your life.
Yeah, look in the mirror, as we've been saying. Look at your own scary yearbook picture where you're frightening everyone. Anyway, the end, I think, is quite good. There are some elements where I think I want to look at this, but I think sometimes it goes from weird almost to science fiction where it's starting to explain, but I think it comes right back into really terrifying weird at the very end, where he escapes to a degree. He is fleeing from his house when these things start to like breathe through his house. It becomes almost like Hausu, where these creatures, they're like carving in the wall. They seem to be breathing from the walls. It's like the house itself has become living. And so he flees. But then he gets so turned around as he's running, he doesn't really know where he is anymore. And he sees these kids and he's like, oh my God, I can go ask for their phone. I can go ask for help. And he runs up to these kids. And then they turn around, they look at him, and he's like, oh my God. And it's his face like 100 times looking right back at him. And these creatures that once were only, I mean, he was shocked originally when they were the size of his thumb, because they used to be the size of a fingernail. They become the size of a thumb, and now they're almost full-grown humans that have grown up so fast, and they all have his face. However, they're the orange bugs who always made a demented face. So it's his own clown face lunging at him from this park, and they just take him down. And it says basically, the little orange children who came crawling out from the castle and watched impassive as he passed. But then as they come up to him, all of them had his face. I think that's a good, it really shows the face is ever present in terror, I guess, in the shadows. Well,
and it's like, God, I'm going to sound like a Swiss psychologist right now, but it's his shadow. You know what I mean? It's like his shadow, all of the harm he caused onto the world. You know, it's now there. It's something that maybe he couldn't see before because he's looking at those faces before, but they're not movable. They're not interacting with him in any particular way. But they are simultaneously children and himself. His wickedness and cruelty is now being turned back upon himself. And I think that it's like really poetic that it's not like a righteous sense of justice that these children bugs are coming after him. You know what I mean? It's not like, we finally get revenge. It's very insectoid. It's very cold. It's very, there's nothing to it other than just, we're going to eat you now. And also, we have your face. I guess it's like self-cannibalization, but I don't know. The more I think about this, the more I'm like, yeah, that was a really good ending.
Yeah. I love the way you phrased it. We're going to eat you now, and we also have your face. That's terrible. What do you think, too? I was talking about how I'm interested kind of in strange hobbies, I guess, that people have, or just hobbies that people invest a lot of money in, and that when others look at it, they're like, exotic fish? You spent all of your paycheck on these exotic fish? But I think it's interesting, too, how you've got this rhetoric of, you will reap what you sow. You have all of this bad treatment, all of this abuse on these creatures. Then when they're full grown, they're going to come get you. And it's your shadow coming back at you in a very strong head-on way. But I think it's interesting, too, how they are rebuilding his house. He is very into his house. He's pretty wealthy. Pretty darn wealthy. And he has all these people come over, mostly to see the creatures, but he seems to want to show off his house a little bit too. And I think it's interesting that they are slowly, bit by bit, bringing other materials into the house. That's what they do at the castles. They go and find, there's really beautiful scenes where they go and find red rocks, pieces of obsidian, all of these different stones, and they make these really beautiful mosaic castles. Now they're doing the same thing, almost like little tiny carpenters in the walls. And I think that is an interesting fear that plays with something scary and something beautiful at the same time. So maybe what we would say is shadow and like horrifying, something bubbling up to the surface, and then something that we aspire to happening simultaneously, because they become like carpenters of a chapel or carpenters of a castle, masons of a castle. I don't know why you would make a wood castle, but anyway, they're creating this thing. They're extremely creative. They are little architects, I guess, and they are building something that is kind of still worshiping him, because he is still kind of like their god, but he's also kind of like their Satan who must be banished. Get behind me. But they are still trying to make something to worship, but also showing how much they reject him at the same time. And I think it's interesting. It's terrifying. It's like termites in your house, but it's also like your house is now a beautiful castle. And that thing happening at the same time is a very weird, overwhelming feeling.
Well, they're rewriting his house, which is a part of his identity, but they're also rewriting his brain and his will, which is also a part of his identity. My favorite line in this, like the line that gave me the most joy, was the first detectable by me moment that they alluded to this, which was, as he fled, he was filled with a deep sense of contentment that coated his fear like a layer of syrup. He suspected it was not his own. So at some point, the telepathic nature of these insects starts linking up with his own brain. And when the maw is hungry, he himself feels hunger. And he knows the only way to satiate that hunger is to feed the maw. So like it's rewriting over his house. But in a sense, like, he gets subsumed within this hive. I almost get the feeling that if he had just stayed at home and not fled, he would have been fine. He would have been great.
He makes a lot of wrong turns here, Zach. I mean, everything that he does is a bad decision. Just be nice to them, feed them. That's all that's the only instruction. Just feed them. So, no, I'm not going to feed them. It's a weird symbiotic relationship. What is that? There's that bacteria, whatever the thing that's in cats, that people say that people become so obsessed with their cat because they're pooping in your...
Yeah.
Yes, toxoplasmosis. Because of toxoplasmosis. I doubt that, they're so cute. It's hard not to like a cat. Maybe it's toxoplasmosis. But
yeah, that's so weird.
it feels like that because you're not actually, it's not a parasite, right? It's two creatures just off doing their own thing, but then you develop a very strong relationship. But his is telepathic. You're right. He says, I've never been so hungry in my life. He's never, ever been so hungry. And this is the time they need to feed more than ever. And it's the time that he decides, okay, I'm going to invite all my friends over. And he does. He has 9 people. And he says, welcome to my chalet and welcome to my home. He opens his door and he just closes it. And he doesn't go in. He just closes it and locks it. And then you can hear the screams on the inside of the house. He also is kind of going through, like when he gets, he doesn't eat. Instead of eating, he just drinks a ton. So he drinks himself silly and he, passes out. And while he is kind of unconscious and passed out, they are going through their own, I don't know what that's called, when a bug develops a new skeleton and has to push out the old one. So they're going through their own kind of, is that metamorphosis? Is that only for a butterfly?
Know, probably, sure.
Okay. So he's going through one where he's unconscious and they're unconscious for a while. And he wakes up first and that is his getaway. It's interesting to see this connection. And I think we've seen that too in some of these weird stories where there's the obsession at first, and then there's like in Hans Heinz, I think that's his name, the spider, there becomes a not just obsession, but like, I will do anything you say because I'm sure that's the right thing to do. And so he does the same thing without realizing it. It's an unconscious thing that happens when he invites an old friend who is a like professional bounty hunter exterminator, and they have flamethrowers. She is about to go and extinguish the bug in the basement, and he says, no, and pushes them in, the 2 exterminators, so they tumble in to be eaten by the maw. It feels like that is a like lizard brain reaction that is dependent on this relationship with these maws.
That whole scene was was actually really, really perfect, because what it essentially shows is it fulfills the promise of these Sandkings. They are insects that go to war with each other. And what we get in that moment is an actual war, but fought between humans with flamethrowers, and just a wall of insects, running down the side of the house to take these humans out. It was really satisfying. And I think that I was about to say, I think we don't give George R.R. Martin enough credit for being able to write, both individual characters and these epic battle scenes. But actually, I think that might be exactly what we give George R.R. Martin for. So maybe I'll rewrite that and say, this is a perfect example of the early genius of Martin, just, years before the works that made him famous for this kind of move.
One note about Martin too. I'm super tired of fans of Martin saying like, I can't believe he's not come out with the book. Give him a break. Like if he never comes out with that book, that's what we deserve. Just let him be George R.R. Martin and let him write what he wants. I think it's ridiculous that people are like haggling him and saying, there's that YouTube video recently where someone said, we all know you're not going to be around that much longer. It's like, come on, just let him create what he's going to create.
Reading this, so I honestly have not thought about Martin since I finished Game of Thrones. I mean, I'm not on the edge of my seat waiting for the next one, but reading this made me be like, if this guy wrote Sandkings, I don't care if he ever finishes Game of Thrones. He's done enough, and I'm sure he's got many, many more in the bank that are just as good as this, that aren't set in the Game of Thrones universe. Unfortunately, I wouldn't know, but maybe George R.R. Martin fans in the chat can illuminate us.
Yeah, any recommendations would be great. I've been so impressed with. I mean, not even just impressed. Like I've been so impressed. Thank you for. I'm just in love with the stuff that he makes every time. It's I just love it. I think about a lot of the characters in Game of Thrones a lot. Anyway, I still want to talk about a couple things from this story because there's so much to go into. I think there's so many ties. It looks very science fiction. It looks very futuristic. But I think there's so many ties that really do make it weird fiction. We talked about the face of evil. We talked about metamorphosis. We talked about uncanny metamorphoses, where it's not just I'm changing, but also there's some weird unconscious like repression that is helping me with this transformation. He's being really cruel, and then he's having his own face through these creatures stare back at him, and the cruelty just stares back at him. But I think also there's the element of being a god or being in control of something. And we've seen that in a few ways through weird fiction, where someone thinks they have a lot of power, or someone thinks they are now in a relationship with something with a lot of power, and maybe it's in control, or maybe you're in control. But Woe tells him this. She's like, look, you were their god. They were here to worship you, and that's why they put your face on the castles. And you were their god, and you made them this way. They have become terrible. I've never seen them ever turn into something like this. Only you have made them turn into these monsters who are just eating people left and right. I think that's very interesting to think about one's power involved in something supernatural and how they contribute to the shape of that supernatural thing.
You ever play that Windows game, Black and White?
No.
Oh, so imagine, if you will, Sim City, but you are a god, like a giant floating hand. And you have all of these villagers who either worship you or worship you out of love or worship you out of fear, basically. Oh. And like, you do things for your village. It's like SimCity, Age of Empires kind of a thing, but you are a god, and your actions determine whether you are a good or an evil god, and the game kind of changes according to that. It was a middle school classic. It was awesome. But I thought of that game as I was reading this. Did the developers of that game read this story? Who could say? But
jeez, your middle school is so much better than mine. I just kept dying of dysentery over and over again. You got to be a god. That's not really fair there, Zach.
It was elementary school. I was playing Oregon Trail. Well, before we wrap up on this, I don't know if you knew this, but The Outer Limits actually did an adaptation of this, like a 90-minute adaptation. Yeah.
Cool. That's wild.
It's on YouTube. I'm telling you, Bob, and I'm telling anyone who's watching this, just search it on YouTube. It is really interesting. Is it better than this? No, of course not. But it's really interesting for the choices that they made and how they decided to adapt this story. And I thought of it as you were talking about, like, is it sci-fi? It's more weird, it makes you wonder, like, just how necessary is this sci-fi universe in which this is based? And what the adaptation made me realize is, in a weird way, it's actually kind of crucial. So what the adaptation does is you have like a NASA scientist who's analyzing Mars soil samples, and there's like the eggs in them. So he ends up getting fired, so he takes the eggs home. And it turns into like a kind of, I don't want to say Honey, We Shrunk the Kids, but it's like a weird mixture between Herbert West, Reanimator, was like a mad scientist who just keeps taking it to the next level, and like Honey, We Shrunk the Kids, and that he's got a wife and a kid and a dog, that are constantly being alienated from him further and further. So it's like a family drama meets this weird insect thing. It's not, it was fun. It's really, really fun. It's definitely worth watching. But if there's one image that I think the filmed version does that excels what I saw in here, is at the very end, at the final iteration of the castle in his basement, and he's trying to save his kid, away from it. The castle with his face on it, the insects come out and they pour out through his mouth like he's vomiting insects, and out of his eyes and out of his nose. It is such a cool image. Yeah.
So frightening.
Yeah.
Zach, one more thing before we do close, because something you said made me think of really what weird fiction needs. Because you just said they, for the movie, made it a little bit more science fiction, and why is it even science fiction in this story? I was thinking about how weird science fiction is, because this world, they call it Asgard, right? And it's Baldur's largest city. So it's almost like it's not even science fiction. It's just either these places are named after these, places from what's the English for Norwegian fiction? Norwegian myths, Scandinavian fiction. Sorry. But they make it feel like we can't tell if it's science fiction. We can't tell if it's fantasy. It reminds me of the scene when we first see the guys with the flamethrowers when they go into his pool, which is no longer full of water, it's just full of sand. And as they're going to kill the two Maws, they've got their flamethrowers ready. They see the little tiny Sandkings running around. They juice up their flamethrower, and then they both like sink into the sand because there's a pit. And now they're suddenly covered up to their chest and they can't get out. All of these little guys swarm on them. It makes me realize that the foundation of maybe the adaptation has to be very scientific, so it feels very solid, right? We know what genre we're in. We know what's going to happen. I feel like weird fiction needs to be on that sand foundation where you could fall in completely. There's something unsettling about the very foundation of weird fiction.
That's a great observation. And to more sand pits in front of us, may we ever fall in. That was my talk to you later.
Oh, okay. To the maw.